Okay, we'll call to order the meeting of the Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board for April 12th, 2022. Member Jordan is not present and is excused, but we will do a roll call. I'm doing that.
Board Member Tripp,
Present?
Board Member Cook,
Here.
Chair Miller,
Here.
and let the record reflect that Vice Chair Jordan is absent.
Member Zagorczyk,
Here.
here.
All right. If you'd all join me in standing and facing the flag for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So we will adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Okay,
I will second.
excellent. Vote, all in favor? Aye. So I understand that there is no public comment on matters not listed on the agenda, and there's no one here.
That is correct.
Okay, so shall we move on to the presentation?
There are no presentations, and there are no public hearings, so we can move on to the administrative items if you wish.
Okay, excellent. Administrative items, we will review and comment on the draft design standards for outdoor seating, review residential objective standards for ministerial residential projects, including two dwelling developments, urban lot splits, and accessory dwelling units, or ADUs.
Thank you. So at the March 15th Town Council meeting, staff presented to the Town Council basically the positive outcomes of COVID. One of them, we believe, there were 3 items that we brought to the council and encouraged them to provide direction to do a long-term streamlined ordinance. In those, one of them was outdoor dining. Outdoor seating is what we've ultimately called it. The second one was curbside pickup, and the third one was temporary retail activation. Today, we're here to discuss some draft design standards that staff put together specifically in regards to outdoor seating is what we're calling. Surprisingly, out of those 37 businesses that participated in this economic recovery program, 16 of them included outdoor seating. So we do believe that we're potentially going to see between 16 and 20 outdoor seating applications. Again, we call this the positive outcome of the pandemic. If you can see here on the screen, the majority of these are located on Washington Street. And as you can see in the attached draft policies, we are requiring that the business be fronting on Washington Street or proximal to Washington Street and located in a
Run down the names of those because I can't read them on the screen.
R&D, Chichio, Jessup, Restoration Hardware, French Laundry, Heston, Bouchon, La Calenda, Chiarello, Aware Care, Hill Family Estates, Handwritten Wines, and Heron House. This doesn't actually have all of them because I know Trident, Silver Trident had it, and some other tasting rooms, so I don't know why This may have just been all of them that were originally included. So what staff did is kind of went around and looked throughout town on some existing use permitted examples. How can we look at some existing situations? One of here that you can see today is Bistro Gentil. It has a fully covered installed heaters and fans, and it really acts more like an indoor room. This is not what we're looking at approving today or directing. Another use permit example is the Bouchon front patio. Some things to note, as you walk by, the landscaping is very tall. It precludes the walker or the visitor to be able to go in and see the people, the patrons. So the Washington Street activation, because of that tall landscaping, actually isn't happening. There is portable heaters, permanent outdoor furniture, and long-term shade structures. This is what I was just describing. From the visitor, from the pedestrian, from the car, the mature landscaping really blocks the view to create that activation. So one of the draft standards that we've included in the draft policy is to keep that area from 3 feet high from the shade structure open, so that the landscaping would be restricted to, I think it was 36 inches. Here's another one. This is Jessup Cellar. Some of the things to note, and here you see this corten steel wall. ABC has a requirement if you have alcohol beverages that it has to be delineated and separated from public and separated from other areas. So one thing that we're encouraging is this barricade to include long-term furniture. Here's a good example. Again, the visibility is not restricted. There's no landscape barrier. And it looks more permanent. Across the street at North Block Hotel, here's a nice example. The heaters are integrated into the design. Here's some small landscape feature. It still creates that delineation, but also looks more, it's more integrated into the overall design. And now we're moving into outdoor seating that is not use permitted, and it was approved temporarily as part of the ERP program. Just to let everybody know, it is set to sunset June 30th. So as of July 1, what you're seeing ahead of you would not be allowed unless we allowed some new measure. Here's just examples. Bistro Gentil has this little table. Staff finds this really nice. It's kind of flexible. It's not necessarily for outdoor dining. Before, the ordinance would not have allowed it and would have prohibited it. Staff thinks, I see a lot of people sitting here, actually quite a lot. I think it's kind of a nice street activation. Here's some examples of some things that obviously this was a temporary measure. They didn't know how to do it. It still looks nice, but it's something to consider. We are moving the policy that's drafted before you today has a requirement to not have temporary ropes and to actually have a more permanent fixture. I have heard from some of the business community that stock is really hard to find for permanent furniture, so they are going to be asking for some temporary measures. So it might be like a 6-month interim plan where if they do approve this license agreement that we're going to move towards and present to council on May 3rd, that they could have a temporary option. So here the tables look temporary, the rope looks temporary. I've had conversations with management at this establishment. They are very excited to come with a more permanent process that provides a permanent design that would look more attractive. Here's another example, same establishment, Silver Trident. This is on the side courtyard. Staff calls this the peekaboo. I actually think it's really nice. I think it gives you a small little look. It's not necessarily fronting directly on Washington Street, but it does give the pedestrian a little interest of what's around the corner. So even though this isn't directly on Washington, staff would consider this would be proximal to Washington and would encourage these areas as long as it's still visible from Washington Street. This is Hill Family Estates. There's 2 tables with 2 chairs. The existing awning, this is an example of long-term shade. The existing awning already goes over the entirety of where the chairs would be. I have talked to management here, and they also are very excited. They currently don't have the temporary rope, but this would be a good example of how they could encourage something that looks more integrated into the streetscape and as part of the business. Here's a good example. As the draft standards are drafted, in this particular area, they would need to keep 40 inches clear for ADA public right-of-way access. So as part of the sidewalk, they would need 40 inches totally open for a pedestrian to go. And then anything beyond that, as long as they meet the ADA access between chairs and tables. So they might be able to get one more table or chair, but they would have to delineate the private versus public walkway. We call this porch activation. It's kind of fun. You can see it from the street. The umbrella actually brings attention to it. This is something that I haven't seen a lot of action on this particular porch, but the few times I have, it kind of provides street interest and activates the Washington Street frontage. Here's another example. This is behind Whistle Stop at the Cornerstone Cellars. This is actually not visible from Washington Street, but staff would consider this proximal to Washington Street. Still provides, if it had a little peekaboo, you could still see it from the central core, and would also consider this being something that would qualify for this program. This is an example of something that we don't think was successful. This was an outdoor seating at the Heston Winery. What I've seen as I walk by, it's more of like an outdoor display of merchandise. Part of the ERP, folks were allowed to have temporary signage, whether it be the sandwich board sign, outdoor display of merchandise, which you saw at the Panama Hats. Here's an example of outdoor display of merchandise and temporary signs. All of those qualify as temporary signs, and the council has given us direction to work together on a comprehensive sign ordinance before this board. So you'll see probably end of summer, early fall, a lot of conversation about taking a look at the overall sign ordinance in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce. So at this point, we've any exterior display of merchandise, temporary signage would automatically go away and sunset July 1, and it's been tabled for a secondary conversation as part of the sign ordinance before you in a couple months. This is an example of something that would not qualify for outdoor seating as part of this program. This was afforded as part of the ERP. It was a unique situation. This is the outdoor courtyard at R&D. If they were to want to have more outdoor seating, this would require a use permit modification and wouldn't qualify for the streamline approach that we're talking about. And this was just some inspiration. Here's a summer in France, an Irish bakery, and my favorite, London. So I just wanted to kind of show you kind of where we're headed, what we're looking at, and some elements. I thought what we could do is go through the draft standards. The intention tonight is more like a workshop. We want it to be a question and answer. We want it to be casual. I'm going to start making notes of things that you like, things that you don't like. We do have some time with the town attorney to ask some clarifying questions on Thursday. And then with your direction and with your revisions, staff will be presenting it to the town council May 3rd. It is a new ordinance, so it would require 30 days for it to come into effect. And I do think that the council would be considering some sort of temporary measures for those folks that are already interested until they can apply and get the long-term design. The direction of the ordinance right now is that it would be called a license agreement. So the folks that would like to participate in these outdoor dining would be afforded a license. And then if they didn't comply with the agreement of the license, then the license would be removed and there would be no change to their underlying use permit rather than a use permit modification.
So is this, will the standards for a use permit to have outdoor seating still exist, and this is sort of sits
Hillary,
along.
would you mind talking into the
Sorry.
microphone?
So is this a separate criteria from the standards in the land use permit or the use permit that would allow you to have outdoor dining? Will those standards still exist, or will this be the only place somebody would go to look to find out what governs outdoor dining?
This is just a streamlined approach for Washington Street activation. So there's going to be a lot of, let's look at R&D as a perfect example. That wouldn't actually qualify for this program because they don't have direct Washington Street activation. So one of the requirements of the program is that it creates Washington Street activation. In regard to the changing of the zoning ordinance, we're not changing anything. What we're basically creating is a streamlined policy that would afford a temporary or long-term license so the folks can invest in long-term furniture. They can present something that is kind of a win-win for what we consider street activation, and in turn they get an affordance of outdoor.
So when you say streamlined, it's streamlining the process of application, but it's not necessarily a administratively reviewed and permitted application, or is it?
It would be a streamlined approval from the town manager if it qualifies for these design standards that you guys respond to. The draft is here. Must have ADA access. Must have street activation.
But the design of those permitted or seeking permitted applications would not come before us.
Correct. It would be a administrative approval from the town manager.
Okay.
What I'm asking you today is to opine on these kind of design standards. And that was really the direction that I received from the council at the beginning, and then working with the Chamber of Commerce, whatever to expedite it and afford it was something that the business community and the town council was really in support of. The council was very clear that they actually extended the date. They wanted me to return to the council next week, and I said I wouldn't have enough time to present to you and receive your comments, and they were very clear that they wanted you to have this conversation and they wanted your opinion, and that I would be returning to them after we met.
One of the things, having sat on this board for a couple of years now, some of the photographs of installations for these street activations that you showed us were things that came before us that were approved in a specific way and then were installed in a completely different way. So it makes me wonder if there's really relevance to our giving you direction on what the standards should be, and then not have the ability to review how people are interpreting standards that we're coming up with, and then doing kind of whatever ends up being available at Costco or, whatever they can do.
I'm going to jump in on behalf of both Kirsty and myself and say that we absolutely still want your input. And I know that the two of us spend a lot of time really thinking about the intention of the code, and we want to represent your opinions and your intellect as far as it applies to your purview and beyond. We care. So I don't think that it would be a waste of time, and I think that we have a follow through in a program to where we would,
I also think it was kind of a get away with whatever you can during COVID. A lot of the programs, if you're talking about some of the temporary measures during COVID, they were kind of given a lot of affordance.
No, these were
Yeah,
permanent.
this was prior to COVID, actually.
It was.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is that some of those would still have to go through the more robust use permit, right?
We have two going to be coming before you, mainly because to qualify for this particular program, you need to be included in the employee parking management. And if a business isn't interested or isn't signed up, then they would still have to go through the regular use permit process, come before you, and then go to town council for any exterior changes.
So for example, R&D or the North Block Hotel, if they wanted to expand their outdoor seating and eating, that would require coming through the use permit process? Am I getting that correct?
I mean, it's not a one size fits all. And that's the reason why it's going through this process where, you know, staff still needs to make sure that they're compliant with their open space, with their FAR, with their use permit conditions. So what they're going to do is give us a example of, hey, we want this little bit of street activation. But anything more than that would absolutely still require. R&D is an anomaly because it's not visible from Washington Street, and it doesn't afford the Washington Street activation, so it wouldn't qualify for this program. North Block Hotel would. However, both North Block Hotel and the neighbor across the street, Jessup, already use permitted for outdoor dining.
Well, that's,
So it wouldn't really it wouldn't need to. I mean, we're really talking about the few the few spots up and down Washington Street, Handwritten Wines, Silver Trident, the Priest Ranch.
So if the use permit is basing the employee parking on the number of guests that it can accommodate
Correct.
inside the building, and they're adding seating outside the building, thus increasing the number of guests, thus increasing staff.
They
Does
have
that
to
then-
provide, we're calling it a seasonal audit and a seasonal plan. So say they have 100 seats. First of all, tasting rooms are use permitted a little bit differently. They're actually use permitted based on the square footage and the number of employees for the employee management. So what they're going to do is provide a seasonal plan, how there's no net increase in parking, and then do a seasonal audit where they submit to us, we've had this many reservations and this is how we accommodated it. They will be responsible for themselves. The reality is when it's hot, nobody wants to be outside in the hot. And when it's temperate, folks probably want to be more outside than inside. So it's going to be their job to manage the number of reservations. From talking to the business community, they say 90 to 95% of today's activity is reservation based. So I don't see it being a entirely big effort in that regard. They already go through a use permit compliance audit. We've already started those. So every year we already meet with the business owner and say, here's your use permit, here's your requirements, how are you complying? So the outdoor activation would just be part of that.
I would think, based on the things you just said, also it would be much safer approach and better understood by everybody to just have it. The seating you have is the seating you have. If you want to move some outside, you can.
Yep.
But not to change the capacity.
Correct.
I wouldn't do seasonal things, because when does the season start? When does the season end? I don't think that would ever be followed.
No, what they would be doing is submitting a seasonal report to us. So 4 times a year, they would have to show us that they stayed within their overall seat count.
So that they will be staying within, I mean, that's part of the requirement,
That's
as they
that's the
stay.
yeah, otherwise
Okay.
it's Kirsty and Diane going and counting seats.
Right, right. Okay. So I didn't see anything in here that calls that out,
Let me find
that
it.
says you don't get
I
any
think
more
provide a
seating.
seasonal plan, it would be under 2G. Provide a seasonal plan that complies with the approved use permit for the property regarding the overall number of patrons and not to exceed. Businesses shall be subject to unannounced audits, spot checks, or submit monthly report.
And again, this would be a process that we would be reviewing, so I don't think it's,
Yeah, it would be part of their annual compliance. When we meet with them, we would say, how's it going? Again, it's a license, so if for some reason they're
Right.
abusing it, we just take it out.
or
and-
it's not working.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any items in particular that you guys want to discuss that were presented to you?
I think overall, the idea of continuing the outdoor seating is wonderful. And I think it does, those little places that it added a seat or two, it provides a really nice
Yeah.
ambiance on the street. So I totally support that. There were just some things that kind of didn't, like the installation or construction of outdoor dining enclosures. So are enclosures going to
Can
be?
you tell me which number you're actually reading so I can follow it?
2B. So they're gonna be able to do enclosures?
I guess when I meant enclosures, I just meant the landscape enclosures, so they're not allowed to go anything
Planters.
over 3 feet tall, because they have to leave that open space. So,
An
if-
enclosure seems
if
more like a
you-
tent.
if you wish, I could
Okay.
change it to, landscape,
Yeah,
barrier.
yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I think, although it does change quite often, I think the job that North Block did looks nice.
Yeah.
And I think that would kind of be what they're shooting
And if
for,
anything
right?
comes atypical, something, maybe like a cool design, staff has every option to bring it to you and defer it to you. At this point, things that I've seen is basically just small landscape features and some nicer tables and chairs. I haven't seen anything. The direction from the town council was less is more, simplicity. So I think that's kind of where they're headed.
But if they want to serve alcohol, then they have to have the barriers.
The barrier. So I just
So if they're gonna
changed,
be using-
and
okay.
I called it, instead of enclosure, landscape barrier.
Okay. Outdoor furniture, no temporary ropes. I'm 100% behind that. The B4, 5, 6. Wait, where are we?
Design criteria?
Design criteria 7, the maximum height of an opaque barrier. So we're not going to allow any transparent barriers like we just allowed at RH. Is that correct? No drop-down plastic shades,
Not as
clear
part of
shades?
this. It
Okay,
would be,
okay.
part of a use permit modification. Did you
Okay.
see it when it was down the other day, by the way?
Yes,
Did you like it?
it's okay. It kind of removes it from the street, which you kind of hate to see. Even though you can see through it, it definitely separates it. So that, my fear is that they just will use it too often. But,
Well, we'll be monitoring that. I did
Yeah.
go by there in the morning when it was raining and it was closed, and then I went by there on my way home from work and it was open. So I do think that it's intentionally for protection, and that is a use permitted area, so that would not qualify, to answer your question, as part of this program. They would have to come in to actually use permit that area, and then use permit modify it to have the transparent awning.
okay. And you mentioned keeping the landscaping low, which I think is important because Bouchon has
Yeah.
definitely closed off their patio.
Yeah.
And is that specifically
I
provided
think that
for
would be
here?
under that same category. The maximum height of an opaque barrier and the bottom of any awning shall remain open. So I can,
Inclusive of landscaping?
yeah, so
Okay.
we can be
Can
more
you set a-
clear
yeah,
and
set
say,
a height or something?
landscaping features,
Mm-hmm.
landscape features shall not be more than 40 inches tall, 36 inches.
Trying to think how, let's see, a seat is
Yeah.
Table height is 30.
29, 30,
Yeah.
36, 40 is getting
Tall.
36.
Okay. Got it.
Cool.
While we're on that same topic, I know it's overkill, but one suggestion I had is to really encourage planting that is water, conserves water.
Yeah, that's a great
I
one.
mean, I sort of feel like we just need to keep saying that whenever we can. So that would be under design, it's not a design criteria per se, but since it's addressed in B3, the landscape pots, maybe we could put something in there.
It
to the-
just, so it says outdoor landscape pots or containers are encouraged. Water drainage onto the sidewalk is not allowed and must comply with water conservation measures.
Oh, I took that to be the drainage. I see what you're saying. So
Oh,
the,
and the landscape,
right,
and-
yeah, the planting is more what I was
the
thinking.
plantings
Maybe I just misread
Drought
that.
tolerant planting.
must be drought tolerant.
Because the water conservation speaks more to the letting water run out in the street right now. At least that's how I read it. So
Okay.
that would be great.
Yeah.
I had another question, but I don't want to preempt Kimberly. So this, I see this a little bit from the business perspective, which this is a really nice thing because you don't have to go through the public hearing and it's streamlined. So and also then my other thought is you always look to the future when you're drafting something like this. I understand it's been great on Washington Street. Since it is such a benefit and there may someday be businesses that could use this that aren't on Washington Street, I'm wondering why we would stop them. I mean, if it's a good idea and people walk around, and I certainly do. I can't think of one right now, and so that's why I say it would be in the future if somebody did have a business.
I did bring that up to the council. I said, what about just in a commercially zoned property? And they were very specific. They wanted it to be on Washington Street, and they did not want it to be adjacent to a residential parcel.
That leads me to my questions. So there already is a process, a use permit process for outdoor seating, right? That's what Bistro Gentil had and Bouchon had prior to the pandemic. And so my understanding is that that process isn't changing, right? That there is a capacity parking set of ordinances that are being factored in. So any restaurant, even one that opens up, can still apply for a use permit for outdoor seating as per pre-pandemic, right? So I think that's pretty clear, and that none of that's being revised. So this is a new separate set of guidelines that allow these Washington frontage streets. So I would say to Member Tripp that other businesses can still apply for outdoor use permits, right? The difference in this case is we're allowing seats to be shifted outdoors without changing the overall capacity of the restaurant, because if they wanted to increase the capacity, that would trigger a review or a resubmittal. Is that a fair statement or not?
I think the real interest is everybody really enjoyed it, and it was something that was encouraged, and 16 to 20 use permit modifications to come between you over the next year, and then order furniture. We would see the street activation in a year and a half,
I'm not, just be careful. I'm not questioning. I'm just trying to distinguish between the existing use permit process and what we're trying to do here. That's all I'm doing. I think it's a great idea. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just
consider
try
this
to make
the
it objective.
license.
Yes.
Consider this the outdoor seating license. So it doesn't touch the use permit. It's not a use permit modification. It's an agreement between the business and the town saying you can use our sidewalk to have a few tables as long as you play by these rules and as long as you do these nice things. And if it doesn't work, then we take away the license and you revert back to your use permit.
Right.
So it would be part of the code where it would say you could qualify for this outdoor. It's a part of an encroachment permit. Most businesses will have to go into a long-term encroachment permit because they're encroaching on the right-of-way in addition to this license. So there are, some parameters that folks would have to go through. And you'd have to be in the employee parking management, so you were already paying attention to your parking. And on top of it, you would have to have Washington Street activation to even qualify for this potential license.
Makes sense. And then, so for the example for, say, Bistro Gentil, which had those two little bistro tables, because they're serving alcohol, would they actually have to add a barrier between them, or is
I
that?
think that's an overflow. I think they use that, like if you have a reservation or if you're meeting a friend.
Yeah.
Or if you just ate and you're waiting for your ride. I haven't seen actual seating out there, at least in my tenure. Maybe during COVID.
Yeah.
So maybe during COVID they
during
were
COVID, yeah.
afforded it. I think that would be their own requirement.
Yeah.
The barrier is not a town requirement; it's an ABC requirement.
Yeah.
We just want it to look good.
Yeah, of course. No, we do too. And I think the reason I'm asking is I want to protect the businesses more than ourselves, meaning that how can we create a set of guidelines that give the freedom for the businesses to do the right thing for the town and for themselves in a way that doesn't introduce ambiguity in two ways, either, whether it's the ABC takes issue to it, or a business maybe gets a little too ambitious and it starts to move things in the wrong direction for everyone else who's trying to do the right thing. So I think it's just about how do we create put the right guardrails on it in a way that actually
So typically
accomplishes
the
what we want.
process that happens is the ABC, they draw their premise, like in a site map, and then the ABC contacts us and says, do they have use permit authority to do this? And then we say, yes, they have a use permit for this, and then now we'll say, and they have a license for this.
Yeah.
So I think that process, it's kind of already happening between the ABC and the town. All the ABC cares about is that they have the land use permit for it, and then,
Okay, that's good. And I've also read that apparently California is considering easing the sort of open consumption of alcohol. I mean, I think it's headed in that direction anyway, but obviously we can't make decisions on what we think is going to happen, but I'm just sharing that as an anecdote.
yeah, I guess if no longer they need barriers, then we might be coming back to you to ask you if maybe we want to keep it. I think it's going to be something that we're going to see. And obviously, these standards, once we see a few happen, if there's anything that we forgot or that we changed, it's an administrative change that we would take to the council. I'm not afraid of zoning text amendments. If we saw, all of a sudden saw a palm tree and was like,
Yeah.
that's not what we intended.
So I think some of the examples that you showed in Europe where they pull, bistro tables out in front of a restaurant without a barrier, they're not permanent, they don't have things junking up the street, there's a little bit more space to move around without a barrier. I think that is, somewhat preferable in certain cases. The two things that I have kind of broader issue with is on a narrow sidewalk where we're requiring barriers, and sometimes those barriers are planters, and sometimes I agree that planters look good when they look overflowing with plants, and then that pushes the barrier out another foot because you've got spiky plants going out another 12 inches into the public right of way. And I can think of examples where that's happening now and requires, you have to wait for people that are coming one way to pass before you can, like the sidewalk is so narrow that you can't walk side by side.
Yeah, I know. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
And I did try to cater this to accommodate things like that. In that case, I think they would just do a little screen, and it would just need to be architecturally similar to their property. If it looked like it was something that staff didn't like or didn't feel like it was integrated into the property, we would just refer it to you guys, and you guys would take a quick look. You wouldn't have to go to council because it would be part of the administrative process. It's just if it's
So
doesn't look like something that we're comfortable with, that we would just trigger it up to you guys.
I think, a friend of mine that is in the landscape business says plants grow. So like when you plant a little plant, you can expect it to become a bigger plant. And so it looks fine when you do it, but it grows. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. And the other thing that, and I don't know how we address this in the documentation here, but it seems like we've spent so much care in managing the built environment in Yountville, and that some of these temporary situations end up being, rather than something that goes to a designer or an architect to design, it's like you get the busboy to run over to Costco and buy whatever he can get off the shelf. And I think in some of the instances that you showed us, there are things that I don't think should be permitted. And I don't particularly like the red standard issued umbrella on the front of what I think is a really interesting historic building. It feels not considered. And I would want to draw a differentiation between a designed additional environment to the front of a building that has a lot of care applied by this board and by the town council to differentiate that from, like you went to a store and bought whatever was available. There are supply chain issues, so there's not always available what you want, what you originally wanted, and so you got what was available and put it on the front of a historic building in Yountville. I don't think that needs to be permissible. I see people shaking their heads too, so I feel like I have a little bit of support there.
Well, I think the other way to look at it is to balance things out. we look at what is the spirit of the various reviews that come from the ZDRB with regard to building structures, right? Signage, awnings, and the question is when those items, which like an umbrella can be just as prominent as an awning or signage in some respects, how can we not necessarily create a loophole? The goal isn't to create more bureaucracy and excessive review processes, but is it sort of an odd, sort of arbitrary line to draw between something like an awning, which does need to get reviewed, and an umbrella, which doesn't? I think it's a good point.
Yeah, and right here we have it under 4.5, include a shade plan. Note umbrellas may not impede the sidewalk. Long-term shade is encouraged and may require ZDRB review. So we could change that to temporary umbrellas are not allowed, and long-term shade must be approved by ZDRB.
Well, if the structure can't go above 36 inches or 42 inches, doesn't that already preclude an umbrella, or
That's
is that
just the
barrier?
stanchion, the
Okay,
barrier. So I
okay.
think the majority of places that I know, they need shade. The folks that are going to be outside
Right.
activating the street are going to be activating in the afternoon sun. So I think shade is an integral part of it. I actually encourage the awnings over the umbrellas. I think that it comes down to if it's historic, we would need a historic architect's opinion anyways. So I think at what point, I mean, we could do some sort of objective standard like the permanent awning must have so much of the street face, if not, it needs to come to ZDRB.
I think that part of the intention, and Kirsty, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the intention of this as a license and how it's been developed is so that we still do have, it's not just code that we're checking off, right? Like, okay, it meets the code, so it gets approved, and that's it. It is a discussion, and there is, Kirsty does have the ability to review and approve or deny things based on certain criterias and how she sees it fit, since it is not for a one-size-fits-all. So hopefully that would give you a little bit of comfort knowing that. So it's not something that's just going to get approved and not be taken into consideration or not have any ability to influence the development of whatever that change might be. Also, she does talk about in under number 4B, 5, it should be 5, but no, 4, long-term outdoor furniture shall provide interest and be settled. If too unique, planning director will refer to ZDRB or council for approval. And I think that we could expand that if that's a better fit.
And, you know, out of maybe the 16 folks that might be interested, and maybe it comes down to 15, you know, some of them might be a really easy, that looks beautiful and that makes
Right.
sense. And then some of them might be,
Yeah, I'd be okay with, I mean, as long as each business knows that there's an approval process and it goes to staff, and the language is along the lines of sort of elements in keeping with the already approved design and aesthetics guidelines, then staff, you have the discretion to say, yeah, that's the case. Or if they're proposing something that says, actually, we want to create something wildly different for outdoors because we have a theme, well, that triggers a ZDRB process. So I think
the other thing that just came to my mind, and I'm sorry if I didn't
no,
mean
it's
to
fine.
interrupt you at the end, awnings could be considered also as part of the sign ordinance. Sometimes people like signage on awnings. So as we're looking at the signage, sometimes, you know, these elements as part of the structure is indirectly a sign. And so we could consider looking more into that as we dig deep into the sign ordinance. I'm just thinking outside of the
Yeah,
box.
well, I was thinking actually because when La Calenda was going through the approval process, they wanted their name on every awning, and we rejected it because it violated the two
Yeah.
signage. So that was an example of where, you know, we upheld the standard. But yeah, going back to it, I think we don't want to create blockages. So if, like I said, there's a design standard that has been approved, if the outdoor seating is an extension of that, and the businesses know that there has to be a dialogue with staff, then I say go for it. And But otherwise, the things that seem outside of it, that's where you guys know where the line is, and you arbitrate.
So circling back on that, would that eliminate umbrellas? And
In some
ask for
cases, umbrellas
awnings.
might be the right thing, though. So we don't, I mean,
they always look a little sloppy because they're always at different angles. And going back to what Stephen said, you know, you can pick one up anywhere of any quality where an awning provides a better image of quality on the front. And I know there was an instance in town where somebody had just brought a sign design for their business. And we said, we think maybe you should hire a designer. And they came up with a gorgeous sign.
Yeah.
And so much more improved. So I think just making it an awning, something that somebody has to create, will give a lot better quality
okay.
to the sidewalk area. That's my thought.
I mean, I guess my argument was I agree with the idea behind it that there's a difference between awning and umbrella. I guess my argument is that if an umbrella is needed, that still needs to be part of the review process. And if I guess I'm not sure I'd be suggesting that we ban umbrellas because that feels a little
I think
restrictive.
it's a matter of appropriateness. You know, if you're talking about a historic train structure that you want to go and put a Costco awning in front of, it doesn't seem like, you know, it's mindful of the historic nature of that building. But if it's a courtyard, I know that R&D doesn't necessarily pertain in terms of the outdoor dining, but the shading structures that are square, larger square umbrellas with lighting integrated that come out of tables that are permanent seem totally appropriate to me. And
Because
so I think it's balancing the intent with the environment, the built environment. I don't want this to be kind of a free-for-all that erases the care that we've put into managing the built environment in Yountville, and now it becomes like, oh my God, if we get a rainbow awning, everyone's going to notice our business, right? So it shouldn't be just a free for all. It should have some constraints, and I think the easiest way to constrain it is to say that it's use specific and it's appropriate to the intent of the design that is in existence and upholds that quality of design.
That's exactly what my point was.
I think it's fair. I like the point you're making about the historic buildings, and maybe we can give some more thought to that.
Well, and there's, a lot of these restaurants that we're looking at that want to have these things are, the design of the restaurant is French inspired. And so, you look to a precedent, you look to the French bistro on, in the Rive Gauche, and you see how they've done it there, and you emulate that because it fits with the environment. And there are a lot of examples like that. I think precedent and intent are important factors in kind of managing this and mitigating unfortunate things that we end up having to like try to address at a later time and fix.
And a lot of thought is put into signage on how it looks, how it fits the building, without calling out a color chart, but the colors have to fit the building. So I think putting it more in that realm with awnings.
And I liked what Stephen was saying, and I have seen other language that you've drafted that makes it clear that the improvement needs to be connected to the underlying design of the building. But I just wanted to put a 2 cents in, and I think we're here anyway, about, I spent a lot of time down by the chamber, and sometimes the umbrellas are handy because the sun moves. And so I think it would be hard to perhaps just outlaw umbrellas, although I understand the concern, because they have that ability to move with the sun, and that's handy.
Yeah, and I think having that shade plan, like you said, having somebody who's a designer, either whether they're doing an awning or not, it's going to have a lot more intention to it. Usually with a shade plan, you're going to have to figure out where the sun is and what's going to actually work. I know we're not there yet. I just thought I would summarize the notes that I've made, and then we can kind of see if I'm on the right spot. So one of the elements was landscape features shall not be more than 36 inches tall. And that was under the opening between the barrier and the potential shade structure. The including of a shade plan. Long-term shade is encouraged and may require ZDRB. I'd like to kind of go out on a limb here and say maybe things that are affixed to the building would require a 10-day notice before the ZDRB. Then I can at least, if it looks good, I can do a courtesy notice, send it to you guys, and if you say, I want to see it, then you guys could appeal it and see it. Then it would give you guys an option. So I'm just having this conversation, so.
Yeah.
So shade elements that's affixed to a building requires a 10-day courtesy notice to the ZDRB. Okay? Under design criteria, outdoor landscape plants, the planting must be drought tolerant. And then in a general, probably at the beginning of design criteria, I'm going to say design elements must be appropriate in keeping with the existing architectural design and consistent with the design guidelines.
Excellent.
Did I get it all?
Kirsty, on the shading at 36 inches, it seems, if there's a case where delineating a corner with a higher planting or something that makes sense, I think that there should be, maybe it's language that, and you were looking at me when we thought about the 36 inches. So maybe there's something that says, that it's a median of 36 inches with exceptions. I could see, against the building or at a corner, there could be
Yeah.
an opportunity for something taller and something also that could provide shade, if that's.
The other thing is the whole intention of the 36-inch tall is to create that street interface. So maybe I could just say the landscape features that are between the street interface shall be 36 inches with allowance for taller features.
I think that's appropriate.
Okay.
I think somewhere you mentioned curbside pickup. Is that going to come up in a different part?
At this point, I might just go straight to council. I actually quickly drafted design standards for curbside pickup signage, and now I'm just going to say it must be consistent with the sign ordinance and come back for you when we do the sign ordinance. The reality is there's really two people doing curbside pickup right now. We've got Southside and R&D. R&D has a nice sign. We're going to encourage Southside to have a nicer sign.
Yeah.
And then we can look at it as part of the sign ordinance.
GTO doesn't do it anymore?
I don't think so. I think they have some barriers closing off parking, but those elements of the ERP are not recommended to continue. So that what they were afforded to do, kind of like a parklet. We aren't doing a parklet ordinance, and that would sunset July 1.
Okay, yeah, because I don't really see the point of needing to hold up parking spaces
Yep.
for curbside pickup. Okay.
The only thing that I was going to include was any elements to a historic structure would need historic architect's opinion.
Great.
One little side note is that I know we're talking about this as being like a benefit of the pandemic and something that the pandemic taught us. And I mean, all signs point to this pandemic is with us for a while as an endemic. And that these things, I think, carry over well into adjustments that we're all making in our lives and in our communities to address ongoing concerns around curbside pickup and dining outside. There are some people that are just more comfortable with it. So I think it's important that we address it, and I don't think it's really going away. We're not post-COVID. We're in it. So.
And it is kind of fun when you see that street activated. It kind
I
of
love
creates
it.
a little lively atmosphere, and so
Absolutely.
it'd be nice to, keep it going. We didn't really talk about the temporary retail activation, but just if you guys are interested, it's not like a pop-up. I mean, it's technically a pop-up, but don't be thinking it's like an easy up pop-up. I don't know if anybody went to any of the Jessup Cellars. So that's basically allowing that long-term for anything that's a vacant retail spot or even a grassy area if somebody wanted to do a pop-up sorbet tasting, things like that they could ask for it. And it was just something that could be allowed.
Is that like a temporary use permit or a conditional use permit?
It's like a temporary use permit. It's similar to a special event, but it's more
there
of
a
a
limit
temporary.
to the
Yes,
time?
30 days, no longer than
Okay.
30 days. And anything longer than that would have to go to both you guys and the council up to 6 months. And then they would have to go to normal use permit. But, you know, there's some empty retail spaces. We're really hoping that maybe it can kind of expedite some activity, get some more things happening, and also afford other people who maybe couldn't have a long-term lease, just to have something kind of fun. We heard
they're
lots
fun.
of really nice things from
Yeah.
Jessup, and
Yes.
we just thought it was an opportunity to encourage it.
It's great of them to make that available.
Yeah, we can.
Are we ready to move on?
Do you want to do a formal vote on those elements that I just described?
Okay.
Should we vote, or do you want to compile them in a more kind of ordinance?
It will be in an ordinance. I mean, I'm just worried about timing. This is going to town council on May 3rd. I'm happy to, I meet with the town attorney on Thursday for the draft ordinance. And once I have it into a draft ordinance form, I'm happy to send it to you folks, and maybe it could be included in a public comment before May 3rd. I just don't know how else we could get it to you and have a,
I don't feel like we need to, I mean,
I don't either. I'm fine just approving it
yeah,
today based on
I'm okay.
what we
am
talked
too.
about.
I think might be nice if we all endorsed it. It gives it a little more oomph, you know. So I would be fine with endorsing it or voting for it, but I defer to my colleagues.
and we don't need to do a roll call anymore now that we're in person. So if you just want to do a regular vote, Diane can catalog it.
So then, does anyone want to come up with a motion that we're voting on, I guess?
Yeah,
Or-
but before we do that, Jorge, are you here for public comment for outdoor seating?
I am not.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Does anyone have a motion?
Oh, I'll move that as a board, we agree with Kirsty's summary of the items that we put forward. I don't know if I could, well, anyway, that's what I would move, that we endorse what Kirsty described to us as the outcome of our discussion and put it forward to the council.
And I'll second that.
All right. Can we have a show of hands for everyone in favor of that motion?
Aye,
It's unanimous.
thank you.
All right. The next item is consideration of a second ZDRB meeting
Oh,
in.
no, we still have objective standards
Oh,
to
I'm
discuss.
sorry, the objective standards, sorry, I'm moving ahead.
Whole bunch.
Objective standards for residential projects, including two dwelling developments, urban lot splits, and accessory dwelling units, or ADUs.
Yeah, you guys have heard over the last few months, there's been some major changes in state legislation that is streamlining the approval of residential units. In response to Assembly Bill 9 or Senate Bill 9, staff did present to the town council what was called an urgency ordinance. An urgency ordinance is effective immediately without the 30-day first and second review. And it has a time period. So the urgency ordinance will be expiring in a couple months, and so staff is preparing a non-urgency ordinance with the same elements as the urgency ordinance. And that is, SB 9 is what established the two dwelling unit, which is basically two primaries, and then you still get your two ADUs. So a single-family lot could have 4 structures on it. In addition, with the same premise that you could have 4 residential structures per lot, that SB 9 also allowed you to do an urban lot split and put 2 houses on each lot. So the urgency ordinance really established some ambiguity in state code, like the size of an SB 9 second primary dwelling unit, as part of this ordinance is limited to 800 square feet, minimum and max. And then this is separate to the ADU ordinance. So what staff did, thanks to Diane, she created these great spreadsheets because as part of SB 9, you want me to stick them up here?
Please.
We'll start with one at a time, so I'll have to get in here in a minute. So what SB 9 requires is that we have 30 days to approve it, deny it, or determine it incomplete. So these handy-dandy spreadsheets that Diane developed for 2 dwelling unit and urban lot splits are really something that we thought would be helpful for staff in reviewing an application, also for the public who might be interested in doing these requirements. The majority of it is right out of state code. However, we can still require objective standards. So before you tonight is 4 spreadsheets. The 2 dwelling unit requirements from state law, urban lot split requirements from state law. Both of those would prohibit any discretionary review. So it'd be ministerial, and staff can only deny it if it can't meet the finding. If staff were to deny it, I would have to provide those legal findings to the state. So a denial is very strict. So the compliance, yes or no, is basically as much as we can go. That doesn't mean that we can't require design standards. They just have to be objective, which means can we paint it earth tone colors? That's not objective. Can you have a plant palette that has these 5 colors? That's objective. So I just want to kind of start to cater the ZDRB. You know, there are going to be many projects coming to you still. Basically, the Housing Accountability Act said anytime there's 2 dwelling units, you can no longer have any discretionary review. So most Yountville properties demolishes 1 house and builds a main in a second. That's a net 1 dwelling unit. You're still going to be seeing those projects. It's when there's 2 dwelling units that is automatically approved and allowed, like staff would have to process within 30 days. So as we're preparing all these ordinances, May 17th is going to be a busy day for the planning department at the town council. We are bringing the non-urgency SB 9 2 dwelling unit urban lot split permanently with these spreadsheets before you. In addition, our ADU ordinance is out of compliance with state code. We have a draft to bring it into state code, and the spreadsheet that's before you tonight is in compliance with state code as proposed to be amended May 17th. And then finally, we just took our residential design standards right out of the zoning ordinance and put them in a list. And so some of the things that staff has been seeing in just working with applicants, which you guys are going to see at the next ZDRB meeting, is objective standards such as the minimum porch size. 72 square feet is the minimum porch size. So we have a project that's a 72 square foot porch. And I don't know if it really meets the intention of what we really wanted. So we might want to change that objective standard to say the porch must be more than 50% of the street frontage. Just have that conversation. A 72 square foot porch is actually quite small. And so to have an objective standard that might meet more the intention of what we want for a front porch. We don't regulate re-siding and colors. If the board wants to continue not regulating that, we can. Those are objective standards that if we do it accurately, we could incorporate. What are some of the other ones that kind of came up that, you know, we can't limit setbacks because of state law, but having more of a conversation of eave length. We just wanted to kind of show you what we're faced with when we are going forward with a compliance review. Now that we're in this position where some of the housing projects before us may qualify to be in this expedited review. Why we're doing this, not necessarily overhaul, but these multiple amendments to comply with state code and the zoning ordinance in the next month. We do have time. The town attorney is available to respond to your guys' request to make sure they comply with state code. And we could come back before we ultimately go to town council. So these standards we have a little bit more time with. We could kind of go for the sky and see what we could do. And if there's anything that you guys have questions about, we just wanted to talk them through, have a conversation. If you wanted some more time to think about it, you could, and we could definitely re-agendize it for the next meeting. It would just be a quick turnover to the 17th council meeting.
The spreadsheets you mentioned that Diane put together, are these the ones that are in the packet, or are they separate?
No, they are the ones in the
They-
packet. And forgive me if there's any small grammatical errors. It's very draft stage.
Right. Excel doesn't spell check.
Yes, I know.
So I have a question. If you were to make a duplex, it speaks in here, and this is just I just can't quite wrap my head around it. A duplex that you could then have an urban lot split. How would, I think by definition, a duplex has a shared wall or shared, I think, but I looked in the definitions and so anyway, do you see my confusion?
So an urban lot split in the current state code is very vague. It's almost like you could have 4 units. You could have the 2 main and the 2 ADUs per each lot. We've actually limited it to 2 dwelling units per each lot. So that's why it's described if you can have a main and a second, you can have a second and a SB9 unit, or it could be a duplex. So if you were to do an urban lot split here in Yountville, you would have to prove to us that you have a lot line in between and that it's limited to 2 residential units and that you meet all the objective standards. Right now, I know City of Napa had a few applications. They were able to go through with a lot split ministerially without any dwelling locations, dwelling dimensions, and an unknown number of dwelling units per lot. So we've really kind of refined it. We've spent a lot of time seeing where the potential uncertainties were, and that's where that definition comes. You can have a duplex, you can have basically 2 dwelling units in any kind of configuration per each lot if you do an urban lot split. Did that answer your question?
But you couldn't, okay, duplexes usually are connected, right? One unit and the other. You can't really do a lot split if they're connected, right? You can't really make them into 2 separate
I
if
think what they're
connected.
saying is you
Or am I
can
missing?
split a lot into 2, and then you can put a duplex on each lot.
Oh, thank you.
I think that's what
That's
they're
it.
saying.
Okay, thank
Correct.
you. Thank you.
In fact, SB9 is kind of lovingly called the duplex law, because what SB9
gotcha.
did was allowed you to have a second primary residential unit.
And a duplex.
It was a way to create 4 units
Yeah.
out of one lot.
Okay, thank you.
It was the goal.
But if you do an urban lot split, you do still have to meet the objective standards of setback on each of those lots.
The state law says you can only have 4 feet, and it's 4 feet structure to structure, which means if you have 2 eaves, it's 3 feet to final element. And that's state law required. If you have an existing structure, such as a garage on an existing 0 lot line, and you wanted to turn your garage into a residential unit, the state says that's okay. You don't have to comply with the setbacks. And so these are the requirements that we're going to be stuck with, and that's one of the reasons why these objective standards are actually really important to kind of make the best that we can.
But the FAR still applies.
No.
It does
No, it
not.
doesn't.
Everything is exempt from FAR besides your primary residence. So your .25 in Old Town Historic would only qualify for your primary residence and if your garage wasn't on the second half of the lot.
However, there is,
Lot coverage.
well, I was going to talk about that you can't just they wouldn't be able to design it in any fashion that they like. They would have to come as close to the code as they can. And if they can fit something and maintain more of the setbacks that we have in our regulations, then they would have to choose that route. It's only if it's not feasible to have it in another configuration that would be more conforming, I suppose. Am I mixing up the two?
No, you're not mixing up, but so we have these objective standards, And then there's this random element that you'll see in this spreadsheet and in the state code that says nothing in this code can prohibit us from denying an at least 800 square foot and 16-foot tall structure, which means if there's nowhere else you can put it on the property and it's even in the front setback, if that's the only place they can put it, we legally have to say yes, regardless of the objective standards. So it's this, but I mean, that's really going to happen. I mean, somebody's going to have to prove that they've tried everywhere, and
Right.
you know, it's going to be a. I mean, I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but I think it would take a creative Jenga game to prove that that's the only thing they could do.
And the lots in Yountville are all pretty small. So that kind of,
And most people in Yountville want a nice, beautiful
Yes.
house and a pool.
yes.
But we have already had one discussion that where it came up, well, if you can put this somewhere else, then
Yeah. We get about we do a program called pre-applications. We encourage anybody who's interested in anything and have questions. We'll do a little bit of research. We'll spend an hour. You'll get both me and Diane for an hour, and we will talk to you about whatever questions you have and work with you with the intention that, you know, we're trying to influence the best that we can. But to prove to the activity, we are getting about one a week. So, you know, the word is out on the street that the state is encouraging housing, and folks in Yountville can afford it, and they're really excited about any opportunity. Separate to this.
What a week? I'm sorry. You're getting one a week, one
Well, we've had one a week for the last 3 weeks.
week, one what?
For an hour of work
Pre-application
a
for
day.
an ADU.
Got it.
Separate to this, the town council, Steve Rogers, our town manager, is working with the affordable housing program to come up with a loan, an ADU construction loan, if somebody is interested in having it be deed restricted for affordable monitored rent, which in Napa County is $130,000 or less. So we are also going to be encouraging ADUs, and ADUs are entirely exempt from ZDRB or discretionary action,
So,
separate to this.
A hypothetical question, because to me, what I'm trying to do is reconcile the need, right? I mean, there isn't, the reasons behind these law changes are pretty clear, right? The housing crisis and whatnot. But the question is, when is creating more housing solve the housing crisis? So if somebody decides they want to split their lot into two and then put 4 units on it, do they see a great 4-unit Airbnb potential? So with no intention of anyone living there, it's just great income for them. So to me, the question is, how do we satisfy the state's requirement in a way that doesn't fall into the potential shortcomings of the law in the first place?
We ask this question all the time, and
They
in
didn't
fact,
provide
it's
for
almost an
that.
ethical thing because we haven't kept track up till now. We have a pretty good idea, and we are now keeping track of it. Any ADU that's constructed, Diane has the responsibility of looking at the rental registration program. You have about 324 units or something?
I think we're at like 368 as of this week.
Rental rental units in Yountville, and we think that might be 1 or 2 ADUs. So to answer your question, we fully empathize and absolutely agree with you, and there's nothing we can do. In fact, they just loosened it. Before, we used to have somebody who constructed an ADU sign a deed restriction that it would be owner occupied, and the state even reduced that application. They just say we want as many units and as much as we can with as little restriction as possible. So
Although the law does, I think this law says it has to be 30 days, right? Rented for
Yes.
more. So at
Yes.
least in response to what you're saying, it won't be an Airbnb because
Right,
the
no,
law,
I know about that law, but I'm saying it still will be 4 units designed
Yes.
exclusively for it's not solving any problems.
No.
My point is, it's just more income that's been unlocked for people who want to create the type of dwelling that, you know, will
More
just,
expensive properties.
Unfortunately, this-
Affordable, because now they have more square footage. Yeah.
This
Right.
the
backwards.
state language doesn't provide us with what we need in order to.
Yes.
Well, and really in
accomplish that.
Yountville, you have a really limited floor area ratio. And this is a perfect opportunity to do the addition that you wanted to if you can, you know, propose something that's exempt from the FAR.
Right, by
So-
squeezing a JDU or an ADU. Yep.
Yep. And it wouldn't come to you for review.
Right.
Because a JADU and an ADU, and
One of the things that strikes me as being
hear our frustration.
Yes.
a catch for some of this is in your table, the early in that list of requirements is the completeness of the plans. And it seems like what we're balancing is, someone that has a contractor waiting in the wings that they want to get started on their project can propose a main unit and an accessory dwelling unit without review in order to get it passed quickly, in order to capture that available contractor in a quick period of time.
We would still require any new main units to still come to you. The non-discretionary, the ministerial review is only pertaining to the new accessory dwelling units, or I call it secondary. So second residential units would most likely be exempt from your purview. If somebody were coming in to propose to demolish an existing unit, I mean, I guess if they were providing 3 new units, then they could circumvent your review.
Right.
And that's why these objective standards are so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately. And again, I was hoping like today would be more of a conversation, more of a workshop. These are hot off the press, and there are a lot of information. And we do have some potential time with the town attorney on Thursday and next Tuesday to bring up questions that you guys have, brought to our attention.
I think most of what you've put in, this one is about
This is the two
Two-
dwelling
two
unit,
units?
and this would be what's called the SB9 second residential unit,
Yes.
800 square feet, and these would be the requirements.
And these are, for the most part, straight out of state law, what you've put
For the most
in
part,
this-
or what
in
we
these
bolstered
charts.
in the urgency ordinance.
And I think this is a fantastic way to do it, to make sure nothing is missed. Yes, no, not applicable. The one question that came to mind under that to me was, is this where the one on architecture and paint color? Was that in this
That's in the
2-unit?
ADU.
Is it?
Yep. It might be in the, is it
I
under
thought
the
it was
two?
here.
It might be in the RS.
I think it's
Does
in
this
the
go
ADU.
into T6? Down to T, I have T6.
Let's find out. Setbacks, yeah, no, so this would be,
No, keep going. You're at T2. You're
Yeah,
close.
it is T61.
Yeah, T6.
this is setbacks though.
No, you're at T2. Keep going.
Oh, my
T6.
apologies. Now I get where you're coming from.
Page 11.
Oh, sorry, I didn't do pages.
There it is.
I
Thank you.
think that's one where we
Yes.
can, that isn't, that's the state law, but we can apply some standards to that, right?
I think this is actually what you guys included in your ADU ordinance. So a couple years ago, the state passed ADUs can't have discretionary review, and you guys came up with some points. I am seeing 2 residential units with the same paint color, and I don't know if it meets the intention. I don't know if it's right. I don't know, especially if all of a sudden we see a unit with 4 structures on the same property. Do we want them all to match?
I like, to me, number B, letter B makes sense. Siding material and style should be similar,
You could say paint theme.
but I don't think they all have to be the same color. And I don't think they all need to have the same roof color.
There's the
I would like to allow for more variety in that.
a certain percentage of the same architectural theme. I think that comes from our current design guidelines.
I mean, they could have, windows or front doors that all look different, or that new little house on Madison that they did with the white house, and then the little building in the back is black. I think that looks great.
Yeah.
The problem is making that into an objective one you know? Because you either have to say, A, they're all the same color, or B, they're none of
But
the
you can
same.
allow for variety if it stays with
But
the
then who
same
says what-
architectural theme, something like that.
Well,
Then it
that would be a
becomes
good question to
subjective.
ask the lawyer. Is that objective? Because same architectural theme, that's hard to say. But, I mean, to me,
I think you could say in the same,
Style.
Visual dialect or
shall have matching architectural elements, including paint color.
Do you think they all need to be the same color and the same style?
I agree, this might be a bit restrictive.
I don't, but I think that by saying that it's okay for them not to, it becomes subjective.
I guess if I had to pick between no direction and all the same, I would go with all the same, although I agree, I understand what you're saying. But who's to say when it's right to mix it up, and who's to say when it doesn't seem
Because
quite
you'd
right?
rather it look like 4 separate little houses
cottages,
than,
yeah.
than a little mini development, wouldn't you? I would. I would rather it look
I
like.
think you could say must submit a paint palette showing the colors are consistent or contrasting. I think you could say something like that. I couldn't deny it based on
No.
not having matching paint colors, but we can still direct them to these objective standards. We could still say we want,
Cohesive architectural style.
you just can't deny it.
Did you want to make a comment? Because you're welcome to
Harmonious or cohesive is exactly.
harmonious or cohesive architectural style.
But I do want to just ask you about that. When you say you couldn't deny it, so let's say we had a standard that you couldn't have any vinyl clad windows, but they could still build 800 square feet, so that is okay. You're saying we couldn't deny it if that's the rule?
Yeah. If we had an objective standard that said must have all wood windows, and they
Right.
provided Home Depot vinyl, I could not deny it based on vinyl windows.
So you really can't deny anything on an objective standard?
You have to have objective standards. It can't be open to interpretation.
Well,
You
vinyl
can't
and wood
deny-
is not open to interpretation. I mean, I guess that's what I'm
Nothing
struggling
in my
with.
code can prohibit me from at least approving, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It comes down to that
Okay,
caveat.
okay. Well, I guess what I was making the distinction between, there's code things that would limit the 800. When I read it, I thought that was really focused on the 800 square feet. In other words, our existing rules about where you put something on the lot and whatever, we can't limit anybody if it turns out then that they can't build 800 square feet. But the windows doesn't have anything to do with how many square feet you can build, or whether you could build at all. So that's, I guess, what I was asking. So it's either no objective standards or some objective, because the type of window material seems to me to be objective.
Objective, correct.
To me
Right,
too.
it's A or B.
Can you explain then the example that you gave us about the 750 square foot porch?
So 72 square foot porch.
I'm sorry,
was
72
just-
square foot.
You're actually going to be seeing this project next May, next meeting. And it's just a small porch and it meets the standard. So if it was something that was ministerial, I couldn't deny it. And that's something that came up as I was reviewing it, and I thought this is something that I'd like to talk to you guys about. Because
So if it were made to be, let's say, a larger square footage was in the objective standards, then how would that then,
it would be required.
but you still, based on the example of the wood versus vinyl windows, you couldn't deny it.
So if me denying the porch prohibited them from building it, I couldn't deny it. I couldn't enforce the objective standard. We can still require it, but I can't deny it if it doesn't meet it.
If there's no other way for them to build it.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
again, getting back to the porch, in theory,
Yeah.
that could impact your
So maybe
800,
maybe-
but windows is,
I don't know. I mean, a question for Gary. Unfortunately, I did invite him. He wasn't available today because I thought all these questions would come
Yeah.
up. It's
Yeah.
really vague and uncomfortable. I do think that the paint color is something that we could kind of play with, meet the intention where it says must submit a paint palette, and the if more than 2 dwelling units, they either have to match or be in the same.
The words that he
Cohesive.
used, harmonious and,
I think that
Complementary.
That's objective.
That's objective, okay.
subjective.
but I don't like the
Harmonious
idea.
and cohesive are subjective.
I look at Hillary and I'm like, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I hate.
I think it would have to be must either be contrasting or provide a plant palette that,
But I don't like the idea of saying that they have to all match.
I agree.
So I don't want to go down that road.
That's where it becomes subjective.
And I agree. I really feel for you trying to interpret this. It is just the way it's right. It's a crazy law. So
Watch out,
it's
it's gonna
not
change
really.
again in a
My
year.
questions are not aren't meant to be interrogating you. I just am amazed.
I mean, my sense is that there's a degree of exasperation at the state level, understandably, because it seems like it's a bit of a tug of war between local municipalities and what the state sees as a statewide housing problem. So they're reaching further and further into the local jurisdictions in a way to instigate growth. But obviously now we're seeing that there's no clean or fully documented way to do that without creating a whole host of questions afterwards. So it's creating a very messy intersection between a broad-based, broad brushstroke solution and a much more nuanced local sort of set of criteria.
Well, then do we agree that we don't want them all matching, ideally? Can we just ask Gary to
I'm
come up with a way to
thinking
say that?
that if it might not be a good idea to say they need to be matching, one, because you just might not like it, two, because you'd hope that if it was an addition that unfortunately the owner wasn't intending to rent out, that he's still going to want to make it harmonious
Yeah,
and
attractive
cohesive.
to look
Also, if you do have a development and they do paint it some color that you don't have control over, and now they have to paint all 4 units or all, the same color, that might not be, that would really be an extreme scenario, but maybe not that extreme of an occurrence. I don't know.
I think you could say something like they must be either matching or contrasting, such as an example, and we could do a little example of main house, second unit, and just actually have examples. It's just, it can't be open to, the applicant needs to have very clear direction when they submit, and then it has to be very clear response.
Is contextualism considered to be objective or subjective?
You're creative. Yeah. I mean, I think it has to be black or white,
But it
or
doesn't-
white and white.
It doesn't matter because we can't enforce the objective standards anyway, so I'm not sure why.
I think you can enforce the objective standards. You can't deny it if the objective standards get in the way with at least building an 800 square foot second.
Well, that seems like a contradictory statement.
But I think it does give us some direction. I think it says, if we want to deny, or if we want to propose as an objective standard that you must use fiberglass or wood engineered windows, vinyl is excluded, then it gives Kirsty something to hang her hat on, but it also, she can't deny the project if they can't build it with
Well, I think
that
Hillary
standard
had a
not
good
being
point.
met.
The porch is something that would prohibit you from building it. But the windows, the theme, the color are objective standards that we can enforce.
Okay.
And if I were to deny it, I would have to prove that they don't meet this objective standard and why, and it's denied because they're using vinyl windows rather than,
So you're saying standards that, because obviously this tug of war that I referred to between the state and municipalities is what the state doesn't want are local municipalities or towns coming up with ways to make it impossible for it to actually happen, right? And so I think that we want to be good state citizens. and respect what the state is trying to do in a way that doesn't create a situation, it solves the problem. So it's not a great example, but my parents are from Eastern Europe, and when the government there wanted to create more housing, they would put up these communist slabs, not, and the point is, you just see housing, no problem, right?
Brutalist,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
all, and it's the part of towns that everyone hates. So I paint that as an extreme, and that is by no means what the state is proposing here. My point, though, is that if we don't create a balance, then you solve one problem and create another one. So the question comes down to, how do we maintain the right balance so that the extreme case is that, there's no guidelines and Yountville suddenly is a place people don't want to go to anymore. So you solve the problem for housing, but then the whole point of this town existing goes away. So that to me seems a little short-sighted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the spirit, I think, of what we're trying to do.
So our existing design codes that we have, like, you can't use artificial fake rocks, no Tuscan, that kind of thing. Are those applicable to any of this, or just to the main structure?
I think they are. I
do
mean, it's
too.
just that you couldn't, it's as long as it was explicit.
Yeah,
We just haven't done
And
that spreadsheet yet.
would you bear with me if I just read from the summary of the Legislative Council, because it goes right to this. It says that local agency can and cannot require approving the construction of residential units, but not limited to authorizing the local agency to impose objective zoning standards, objective subdivision standards, and objective design standards as defined, unless those standards would have the effect of physically precluding the construction of up to 2 units of at least 800 square feet, blah, blah, blah. So that's where I took away the idea of physically,
Yeah.
like with the porch, as opposed to the windows
I totally agree.
or the paint color. So I think again, this is,
Well,
take
and
it for what it's worth, but that's my understanding
So
of the
I
law.
think if we were to focus every one of these, whether it's a 2-dwelling unit SB9 residential second unit, an urban lot split, or an ADU, they all still have to do our residential design standards. So it seems like the spreadsheet that we should all be focusing on is the residential design standards, where you guys can take a look at it and ask yourself, is it is it objective enough?
And that's what we were doing in the Zoto.
Yeah, you guys did a great job, because you guys kind of set the stage for it. You guys already
Because
predicted
we knew it was
it.
coming.
We knew-
Yeah.
So
They were keeping us on track.
So really, this is just more of a courtesy of, okay,
Okay.
here we are. Now we're at a stage where, these,
because if I can summarize, in lieu of these projects having to come before design review, if we apply objective standards that are consistent with those of our residential building standards, then at least they're approved administerially with the same objective of maintaining the built environment of Yountville. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay.
I have a clarifying question around, so if I have a lot, or if someone has a lot today, of any size, and what I'm wondering is that in order for these laws to be triggered, does it have to be triggered by a lot split, or can you now, because if I wanted to put a single dwelling, it still would go through the ZDRB, but if the person wanted to put 2 units on there as per the new SB9 plus, I'm curious, does this lot split, does that have to trigger then this process, or can you now just completely put whatever you want on any lot, I guess is what I'm asking.
You have 3 opportunities. You can do the urban lot split,
Yes.
but you would have to prove to me that you could build 2 structures on each one of the lots
Yeah.
to meet the intention of 4.
Yeah.
That would be ministerial.
Yeah.
You could build a second, I call it the SB9 unit, which
Yeah.
is 800 square feet. That would be entirely ministerial. You could do an ADU or a junior ADU, entirely ministerial. So to answer your question, if you wanted to put 3 more housing structures on your property, you could, without doing the urban lot split. The urban lot split's just another opportunity.
Right. But for example, okay. So if someone now currently has, let's say, a 2,400 square foot lot, which is pretty small, they could immediately come and propose a duplex on it of 800 square feet each, and they would get approved right away, right? But if they wanted to put a single family, it would still go through the ZDRB process. Is that?
Or they could propose an urban lot split and put two duplexes.
No, not with 2,400 square feet on the lot. That's too small.
The minimum lot size has to be 1,200 square
1,200.
feet.
That's why I picked
Yeah,
2,400.
so you could split it and then do it eight, yeah.
Good luck
Yeah,
with
you
that.
could.
That's yeah, but then that
I
becomes.
can't
Yeah.
figure
you
it
can't,
out.
you
I
can't put
see.
800 square feet on a 1,200
Why not?
square foot. Well,
Good.
if it's, but you can't put two
No.
800 square foot
No.
and keep it a single story. So that is physically impossible.
But nothing in my code can
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So,
So-
I mean, I think my sense of it, and again, I should think about this. I think it's a bit of scenario planning. I think the numbers are one thing, but at the end of the day, there's physical realities to putting a house on a lot.
We're
that,
not worried about it, and we're not seeing anybody come with lots of SB9 conversations.
Right.
Folks are really just coming and saying, hey, I hear about this ADU law, like what can I do? And it's not because they want to maximize their lot. Maybe it is, maybe there isn't. And the two situations that we've seen, I think one of them was a bona fide, she currently rents a room out to a chef at French Laundry and thought I'd rather have it be in an ADU. So that was a bona fide conversation. A lot of the conversations are being requested over an existing garage. Right now, the code says you can only have it above an existing garage if you have a two-story house. And we're not planning on changing that unless that's the only spot that they can put it, and they can prove that. So at this point, we're holding true to the no two-story ADUs. We're holding true to no new ADU over a garage. It's an ADU over an existing garage if you already have a two-story house. So those requirements could be, we're kind of walking the line. We feel okay with it, and we're going to proceed with it. So we are doing everything we can to try and regulate organized development. And I don't want to spend too much time on the law because there's nothing we can do about it. I'd
Yeah.
really like to either spend time on these design standards, which are objective, and just make sure you guys are comfortable with it because we are moving towards updating the ADU ordinance to comply with state law with not a lot of major changes except for owner occupancy and some other elements.
I think our tables that were created in Zoto and then approved by this board
Yeah.
go a long way towards establishing what the objective standards should be. And perhaps if we wanted to review those on a deeper level, we could create another meeting in May and review those.
You can't, no, because we're going May 17th to town council to comply with the housing element because we're doing 4 different
So
zoning changes.
Couldn't we do it prior to that in May?
You are, or your next meeting is May 10th.
Yep.
I wouldn't be able to implement your changes into the ordinance, and my deadline would be,
Can we,
do a special meeting.
Or have a subgroup with a two-person subgroup? Would that be a possibility? So it wouldn't require a special meeting?
yeah, I think we could do either of those.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just proposing that as
I
a
think so
possibility.
too. I would have to consult with the town attorney, but you guys could vote on it and I can confirm it. But I do think that makes sense if you adopted a two-member
Subcommittee.
residential objective standard. That whoever was chosen would have to kind of be willing to work with Diane and I over the next couple weeks so that we could have it all revised.
The residential design standards chart that you gave us, what does that apply to? Is that what we're talking, is that the only piece we're talking about?
That's existing. That's why
Okay.
I'm a little confused. Yeah, because
Okay.
we've
already done that.
You've already done that,
Yeah.
and it's part of this agenda packet.
It is now in a laundry list form, and you guys can see where we're at. And part of it was really just to confirm that you guys are comfortable knowing, because we are taking it to council, we just wanted you to have the opportunity to look at things like the paint color, which I've already made a note, so we will have that conversation with Gary.
I think the only question that I came up, well, two questions that I came up with out of the residential design standards was that F1 said we allow stucco houses. And
Yep.
I didn't think
Saw that.
we allowed stucco houses when we
Right,
went
I
through
thought
this.
that stucco was prohibited.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at that and I don't know if it needs some amending, but there was, I believe the portion that says that there is no stucco is when it's talking about specifically Mediterranean and Tuscan style homes. And they say, so it's prohibited, such as stucco. So it's not, I think the way I read it, it reads like it only pertains to Mediterranean and Tuscan style homes. That's another portion in another portion of the code.
But I don't remember, I remember our conversation at Zoto being no stucco houses.
I think we could review, if we do it either in a special meeting or in a subcommittee, we could review colors, we could review siding materials, including stucco. Roof pitch is really clear in the current ordinances. And I think doors and windows and trims were as well.
So it doesn't really have very many holes.
It doesn't really have any
No.
any hole. I don't think it has any holes. I think
But I don't think the stucco is, the allowing stucco is correct. I
Well,
think
it
that
might
got-
be. It might be not a hole, but
Well, can you read the one that says F1 on this
Yeah.
page?
And I'm looking at the straight code, and it does say it. Mediterranean and Tuscan design styles that include but are not limited to the following common characteristics of clay, tile, heavy stucco, or plaster, cut and cast stone, wrought iron details, tower-like chimneys, heavy massing, arched openings, and arcades are prohibited. So it's called heavy stucco.
But on this F1, when you go down to item F1, it specifically allows a stucco house. And that wasn't anything that we ever agreed to on Zoto, so I don't know how, if that was just an
It
oversight,
could have just gotten
editing.
mixed. I'm just reading it straight from the code. The following exterior materials are allowed: wood, lap siding, board and bat, shingle, cement board, or stucco. So I think if it's if we, regardless of a two-person committee or a second meeting, we can absolutely remove that. This is a time and opportunity that we can just strike that out.
And then
is
the,
that lifted from state law or from
No.
our?
No, this is
ordinances?
just your
Just
zoning
us.
ordinance.
Okay.
Yep, this is just the little table that you guys did when you did your Zoto. Somehow it probably just
Squeaked by, yeah.
by.
Okay.
and then your other question was about the 72 square foot porch. You asked about having it more defined in an objective way.
Yeah, I'd like to say 50% of the front elevation.
Can you write it something like, front porch shall extend from entry door to one or both corners of the street face of the house? Can you do something specific like that? As I'm walking over, I'm looking at all the front porches.
I love it. Thank you.
So that you're not building a central corridor, you're building a front
Of the side
porch.
corners. I like it.
But if you give it a specific, this side, that side,
Of the street elevation? Right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay. I like it.
I think those were,
So how do you guys feel if I just remove stucco, define the front porch to include that the porch shall extend from the entry door to one or more of the side corners of the street elevation, and bolster the language about paint?
I'd just like to ask about the stucco. So down in Soyo, we have a lot of stucco buildings. And so if I was going to put in an ADU, I might consider stucco because it would match my house. So would we be telling people then you can't, objectively, the objective standard is no stucco?
That's what that would do.
Yeah, so anyway, I just raised that because there are a fair number of stucco houses in some of the subdivisions.
There's also some T111 siding in that area, and we don't allow that either. So I
I think
think,
it's directing people to come up with more inventive ways of solving building cladding rather than just stucco. And that if you were prohibited from creating an ADU that was, sorry, I'm not speaking into the mic, that if you were prohibited in creating an ADU that was stucco to match your existing stucco house, that you might be influenced to reclad the main residence.
Okay, well, I raised it, but I get your drift.
okay.
Last question about parking. So with the lot split and the minimum maximum house requirement, how does parking factor into that?
It depends. We do not, the state law says if you are within proximity to a high-quality transit stop, we don't qualify for that.
We don't.
So we will be requiring parking. However, if you are taking a garage and turning it into an ADU, you no longer can deny it based on reduction of parking. So my response to you is it depends. We still will be monitoring parking. However, we can't deny it if they can't build it because of parking, in which case of like the garage conversion.
Or I'm talking even like a driveway, like a place to park the car. So is it a situation if you have 4 units that are tightly packed on a lot, then it's street parking? Is that what
We would still require it if they could provide it. If they can't provide it, we can't deny it because they can't come up with parking.
Okay.
So it's kind of a,
So then it would be, then if you had a car, you would just park it on the street. But what if you're on a street that doesn't allow street parking? I'm just saying hypothetically, then they would just have to park their car somewhere else, right? Presumably.
yeah.
But
They
Or
also have
maybe you decide that because there's no street parking on that street, then you configure the lot so that you have a place to park off the street.
Yeah.
Because it's desirable. You would hope they would go
that's
that
the hope.
route.
Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah.
where again, we're looking at scenario planning, but then reality obviously hopefully mitigates that. Just curious.
And like I said, for the most part, we're really seeing a trend in Yountville. We just did the analysis out of our recent newly built construction. Of course, what they put on their building permit might not be what their cost of construction truly is, because that's how they pay their fees.
Sure.
But what they're disclosing on their building permit is an average of 750 square feet, dollars a square foot, which is a really high-end, ultra-luxury construction. We are seeing an uptick in construction. We are about 25% above 2018 pre-COVID number of building permits, number of residences, and much higher in valuation. So if you look at all that, and you look at the small lots, and you look at who's being attracted to come here, I don't think we're really grappling with those conversations. I think we're really looking at higher end, nicer quality construction, hopefully a rental unit for the local workforce community.
But based on that housing element meeting, it was obvious that the people that are current residents of Yountville want to see workforce housing
Yeah.
and affordable housing made available.
Yeah,
So
I would be.
we are not trying to be not in my backyard at all. We
Oh,
want
not
it
at
to
all.
happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would add to that
So,
too.
yeah.
My position is that
really
we can
can
do the
need
right
it.
thing
Yeah.
for growth
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't create a whole new set of problems, right? So this isn't, to me, the question is how do we make sure that our job, our role here is to accommodate the evolving nature of life around us in a way that preserves the best interests of the town. It's not to, block things or to fixate that, this is the year that Yountville will never change and, forevermore. It's more about how do we do it in a way that is constructive.
And that's why a couple properties being available and maybe being developed
Yeah.
are exciting.
And if people can figure out a way to do it, that's beautiful and interesting and brings more people in, great. We've
Yeah.
solved the problem. Let's just do it in a way that doesn't create new problems.
So far, what we've seen are really nice projects that people are going to be proposing. So I haven't seen anything that scared us yet. So I just want to confirm, I just want to kind of summarize the few things that we talked about. One was the porch, two was the full strike-through of stucco, and then direction to me to work with the town attorney to come up with a objective standard that encourages paint colors that could include contrasting colors.
And maybe we already covered this, the connection to the existing architecture
For the,
for the addition, the ADU or.
yeah, it says, it shall have matching architectural elements, including siding material and style, roof pitch, material and color, and doors, windows, and trim.
Okay, so that's covered, yeah, okay, thank you.
That would create a conflict if you are a stucco house and want to build a
Right.
stucco ADU. So does the ZDRB want to look at
You
something?
just have to put an except stucco. No,
Okay.
no, I'm just kidding, that was a joke, I'm just being funny. Defending my house.
I have stucco too.
So, if you guys want to vote to give me that direction, if you guys want to have a second meeting, if you guys want to have a ad hoc, I don't think there's really that much to really talk about in an ad hoc meeting, but I'm happy to spend more time with you guys. I can bring these final changes, and the final ordinance, because I'll have all the preparation, at the next meeting, May 10th. Just for you guys' final review, and if there's anything else that you wanted to change, I could probably change it at the council meeting of the 17th.
Can you commit to providing a draft before the weekend of that meeting?
I don't
So that
think
we
I
could-
can't be, I mean, we're gonna be doing, I'll probably have a better idea when I meet with the attorney.
I mean, if
haven't
we
seen
could look
any
at a
drafts
draft
yet.
on Friday before a Tuesday meeting as opposed to Monday before a Tuesday meeting, I think that we could probably jam through it on the
So
Tuesday
just to
meeting.
let you know, we're not changing the residential design standards. The only thing that
Right.
we are gonna be presenting is the SB9 and the ADU consistent with state law. And then we're introducing a new zoning district, which we'll be discussing at the next town council meeting of April 19th is our next housing element study session.
Can
and-
we make the ADU or SB9 standards consistent with the residential standards?
Every residential project are gonna have to go through this spreadsheet
Okay.
already. So whether it's an SB9, ADU, whatever, they still have to comply with these
Okay.
standards.
Okay.
And my understanding is that we're keeping the design standards that we have for the zoning districts now. It's just, we have to be a little bit more diligent about going through them and seeing what is applicable and still in compliance with the state regulations.
Yeah.
So we want to keep it where we can, but we can't overstep our boundary.
Right. Okay.
And honestly, out of all of them, the only things that I really came to mind was the porch and the paint colors. So I don't think we're that far off. I just wanted to give you guys
Materials.
and the materials and the
Materials.
Yeah. And I think I was just trying to give you guys a courtesy of like, hey, this is where we're at. Just
Yeah.
a heads up, this is what we're doing at council on May 17th. If you want to have a final look-see, we can. So I can put it on your next May 10th agenda.
Yep. There was an ADU that came before us last year that had been approved, and they came back before us to see if they could amend it and get approval to put cast stone cladding on the visible walls of that ADU. Do you remember this?
No.
And we rejected it. And we said it either needs to be real stone and go all the way around the building, or you have to choose a different material.
It
So,
was on Talent Lane. I think I was recused from that. I think,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a garage,
yeah.
But it had a residential unit,
not
wasn't
that
it?
big new one on Talent Lane? That was a garage.
This is pretty clear. This is a very clear objective standards. Natural brick or stone is allowed as an accent only. covering no more than 25% of a building facade. So
Right.
if that came to me ministerially, I wouldn't be able to approve it. So I think you guys caught that in the Zoto.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
You guys learned that lesson, and yeah. And I think that ADU is about ready to get a building permit. No?
No, it was in
Pick one.
construction.
Oh, okay.
They were amending it.
Okay.
It's done.
It was a garage, though.
I thought it had a
They don't,
accessory
that one
unit.
doesn't have an ADU.
No? Okay.
Well, while we're talking about May, I just want to give you a courtesy update of that we've got a few projects before you coming up. At our next May meeting, we will have 2 exterior design review that construction went beyond the scope of the permit that will be presented to you. I know of one that's in incomplete, and that is scheduled for the May 10th meeting. The second one may be, I'll know this week. You have 2 landscape plans. 2161 Starkey is finally coming before you for a landscape plan, and 6638 here, Yount Street, is coming to you for a landscape plan. So you'll have both of those. And in addition, you have a new single-family residence and an ADU at the corner of Yount and Monroe. So it's looking like a big meeting. What's that? I think we did, didn't we? Oh,
I think we're wrapped on the previous subject. I think unless you wanted to vote on it, I think the next steps were clear.
I think Diane's requesting a vote, so let's vote. That is the size of the porch, removing stucco entirely, and the paint and directing staff to work with the attorney to do paint colors, and responding to you with those changes in your May 10th agenda.
Okay.
So moved.
So moved. Can we do that?
I mean, you can just say I make a motion based on the summary.
I make a motion that we take Kirsty's summary and apply that and give her the authority to direct the staff to rewrite or to write those conditions and provide them to us for review at our next meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, now we can move on to the month of May. I will say there was no council meeting June 7th. May 10th, if we wanted to add that, we could. If not,
So you want to add a second, that's too much for one meeting? Is that what you're saying?
oh, what's your opinion? I think it's a lot. I think
Sounds
it's-
like a lot.
I think it's
Sounds like
I
a
think
lot.
it's
We'd be here
2
till
exterior modifications, 2 landscape plan, and 1 main.
One May, yeah, that's a big one.
To me, that feels like 2 meetings. And Diane's taking some time off, so you're not back. When are you back?
May
10th and-
3rd. No, May 4th. But I'll be gone, so I won't,
Yeah.
because of the
Be
timing
working.
with the public comment and the drafting and when all of that stuff, we have to have them done before you guys really get them, and I'm concerned about the time crunch for me. That would.
What about May 31st, a Tuesday, no council meeting? I'm just thinking of, I'm trying to keep it consistent on a Tuesday because we want to make sure the TV folks are available.
Works for me.
Yeah.
And then we still have a meeting in June on the 14th? Mm-hmm. Okay, so
So
it's,
2 weeks
And I'm
later.
not at that meeting, so just a heads up.
I'm not
Diane.
either.
Oh.
At
All
the
the good,
14th?
all the better conversation that we're having.
Yeah.
Diane's comfortable.
I think that the 10th and the 31st would work, or the 10th and the 24th.
That works too.
24th is Memorial Day weekend. I don't know, I'm around, but some folks might not be, so I felt like the 31st might be, because Jordan's not here.
So do we want to do the 31st? Is everybody
All
available?
those dates, yeah, everything works for me.
Okay.
We can do it based on, approved based on, Jason's availability too, to make sure, because we wanted to settle on a date that worked for you guys, but then we also obviously have to make sure that he's available.
Okay.
So it could be a motion to hold a second meeting in the month of May to be determined.
I would say for May 31st, first choice, May 24th, second choice.
Okay.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also not here
And,
on the 14th.
I did want to take a quick moment and apologize on the agenda. Eddie's in charge of the templates, and he made all the changes. And I guess what had happened is we initiated the application before he made the changes. We just learned of this today. Because when we visualize it on the computer, it shows the most recent template. But when it got printed, we didn't realize it today when we printed the agenda that it was based on a previous template. So I wanted to do a huge apology, because if it was a public hearing, it labeled it a virtual meeting. It has the wrong board members. Somehow they was able to get the right time. So I don't know how that happened. Unfortunately, we don't have template rights. So it was a mistake that we realized today, and I wanted to send you guys a deep apology.
That's
It's this-
technology in action.
It's
Yes.
this,
Not necessary.
we were a little embarrassed. We were disappointed
Didn't
because we
even
went to a
notice.
lot of effort to make it right.
That's very silly. Yes.
And it's weird that you see it live, but then when
When it posts. All right. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
All in favor? Thanks.
how'd you like your first?